And one of the senior editors at Warner Books wrote me back and she said, I love this. I've never read anything like this. It's a really fascinating idea, but I don't know what to do with it. She goes, it's part medical thriller, part cyber thriller, part science fiction. I don't know what to do with this. And I was trying to make the case that this is not science fiction, that everything I was writing about is actual medical science.
Hello, Todd. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for taking the time and having me on.
And I have your book with me here today, Deadly Vision. I absolutely loved it. Obviously, we'll be getting into it. But this has got to be, I think this year it's going to be one of my favorite books of the year, honestly. And I don't say that lightly. I read a lot, but I absolutely love this book. So we'll get into it. Thank you for sending me a copy, an autographed copy. So let's hear your pitch.
First of all, thank you. I mean, that was high praise. I really do appreciate it. So the book, Deadly Vision, is a high-tech medical psychological thriller. It's based around a major character redemption arc. Our hero has invented a technology to perform heart surgery entirely within virtual reality. And the forces that be, both within the medical center and the toxic politics of medical centers in the United States, as well as the politics of ongoing presidential election, combined to try and stop him from being able to complete his quest of getting this technology live. And as the story goes, there's increasing obstacles placed in front of his way, including madness and murder, that he has to overcome to get his technology to fruition in time to save the life of somebody he loves.
That's great. Thank you. A wonderful pitch. It really sums it up very well, too. So, yeah, let's get into it. Where did this book idea come from?
I've actually played around with this idea for a long time. This book has a long odyssey of a story to tell. The original concept came to me way back in 1994. And if you look at the opening quote, one of the two quotes I use, one's from Benjamin Franklin. The other one is from a virtual reality report in 1994, because in 1994, I was starting to research the possibilities of virtual reality and how it could have medical applications. At the time, it was really being used just for surgical simulation or maybe some training sort of techniques, educational techniques. And in my mind, I was just trying to fathom, where could this go? Where could this lead? How could virtual reality become a daily part of medical science? So that was the genesis, like I said, way back in 1994. But what I really wanted to focus on then was this concept that you can have with virtual reality that you really can't have with any other sort of life technology or existence. And that is the duality of existing both within the virtual world and in the physical world at the same time. And how this duality of experience in these two different worlds could be colliding with inside somebody's brain, and how that could be having an impact upon a certain character. And this concept of duality of existence was just really fascinating to me. The original draft of the novel actually delved more into the virtual reality side of things. There's a little bit more, a little more fantasy elements that were going on inside virtual reality at the time. But the whole goal was to see what would happen to this character who is existing in one world and in the virtual world at the same time. And I just became fascinated with that. So that was the story genesis. And then over the years and trials and tribulations, I just kept massaging the story until we got to what you read.
And how long between where the plot points came together, where you had a solid idea in the actual writing?
So I actually wrote the first draft of this novel way back in 1994.
Okay.
And I did get an agent for it, and it made the rounds going through the major New York publishers. And one of the senior editors at Warner Books wrote me back and she said, I love this. I've never read anything like this. It's a really fascinating idea, but I don't know what to do with it. She goes, it's part medical thriller, part cyber thriller, part science fiction. I don't know what to do with this. And I was trying to make the case that this is not science fiction, that everything I was writing about is actual medical science. And I did not want to be classified as a science fiction author, because I'm not. My inspirations are guys like Michael Crichton, or Robin Cook or Tess Gerritsen, the real medical thriller sort of writers. And But I get what she was saying. Back in 1994, the publishing world wasn't ready for a story about virtual reality and artificial intelligence that wasn't sci-fi, because those were sci-fi terms back then. So, fast forward till now, those terms are now acceptable. So it was time to kind of revisit the book and bring it out. So original draft was done in 1994. After I wrote the book, which I did in just a heated fit of enthusiasm, I realized I should probably learn how to write a book. And so I started taking classes. I took a bunch of extension courses through UC Berkeley, worked with some great writers, started taking medical fiction writing classes with Tess Gerritsen and Michael Palmer back in the East Coast. Learned a tremendous amount from them. They were, both Tess and Michael rest in peace now, but both of them are phenomenal writers, great teachers. So I learned a ton from them. And then I took an intensive writing course from Bob Dugoni. And Robert Dugoni writes, fabulous thrillers. And so that kind of became my foundational craft basis to then revise the book and get into the current format. So from beginning to end, it was a 30-year journey with several completed books along the way that I kept having to change as the story was evolving.
So there'd be a big difference between the first draft of this first book and the current version.
It's kind of funny because I actually came across it the other day. I still have the very first draft. It's printed up on dot matrix. It says 1894, and it's a totally different story. And in fact, this is just an interesting point as a writer for yourself. One of the things that actually got me in trouble with writing on the revisions was trying to hold on to too much of the old writing, thinking I could save myself some time, save myself some energy. Well, I can just, keep this stuff and this and make it all work, when it really didn't. Even the voice had been changing over the years of learning more and delving into the craft. So in the end, what you've read compared to the first draft, maybe there's like 10 words that are the same. They're probably all the, maybe and, but it's only when I really said I had to dissect this whole thing apart again, reconcept the plot from the beginning. And I'm a pretty detailed plotter when it comes to the way I write. And then I rebuilt the whole novel from the ground up. That's when it finally started to click.
So would you say you're an outliner then? Or was your first draft like pantsing on, well, you did the research, but almost like a pantsing idea, exploring a story? You might obviously have the greatest outline ever if you've changed the book multiple times.
I think the first draft was a pants, without a doubt. It was pants on fire. It was, and I'm rather proud that it actually told a pretty coherent story, which again was, it got agented. It was Elizabeth Plomata in San Francisco agency. She picked it up, and it did make the rounds, and it didn't just get completely laughed out of New York. It was pushed out of New York with something heavy. Go away. But at least, it made it there. So from the beginning, I started to develop at least a sense that I could construct a story. Because, as a writer, it's insecurities and doubt is rampant in our profession. Because we just never know if we're conveying properly what we want to convey.
Yeah.
But then once I started learning craft, and I took a course from James Frey, who is a crime writer. He got awards for his crime books, but he also wrote a teaching book called How to Write a Damn Good Novel. And then he wrote How to Write a Damn Good Novel too. And I took UC Berkeley courses from him, and it was like an 8-week intensive course in novel writing. And from him, I really started to learn the concepts of laying out the story in a way that has become, the foundation for what Deadly Vision became, as well as what my next book's going to be, because I'm working on the next book now. So I'm a pretty detailed outliner now. And I outline in an interesting way, though. I outline graphically. I actually plot out on a sheet of paper the basic heroic journey that our main character will be going through. Because even though these books are high-tech thrillers, I'm referring to the next one by these, because there's only one so far, the technology is only as interesting as the human impact. So Deadly Vision is really a tale of a guy who's going through this incredibly extraordinary circumstance to reach a desired end. And the whole point of the story is to have that character evolve and to grow and to develop and change. So I essentially plotted that out, with the major intervening points that are going to be the major obstacle points, the early crescendo, the bottoming out, the final plateau, making sure that he's ending at a place which is different than where he started as far as his, development, his psychology, who he is as a human being. And then along that path, for this event to happen, you have to have this, and this preceding. So each of these became what I call obligate scenes. And then I took all the obligate scenes and I put them on 3x5 index cards. And then on that 3x5 index card, I make a little notation as to which research technology I was going to be including or talking about within that passage.
Okay.
So in the end, I had this stack of 3x5 cards, which is all scenes laid out. And each scene would talk about, okay, here we're going to be talking about the virtual heart project. Here we're going to do, in the book, I talked about how they now have this open MRI that projects images onto the human body. So this is where that's going to go. This is where the leg lab technology is going to go, and have all those little guides as to what was going to happen. And then writing simply became turning over a card. And this is the scene I'm going to be writing now, and I just start writing. So that part is carefully crafted, but the scene itself is still being written in the moment.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a combination of outlining and pantsing, I guess is the best way to describe it.
I love that idea of the cards.
I just recently saw a quote, and I had not heard this before. In fact, Quentin Tarantino hadn't even made a movie when I first started writing. That's how long ago it was. But apparently Quentin Tarantino has said that to write a movie, you need 70 ideas. You write down an idea is a scene. You write down the scene on a card, and once you have 70 cards, you have your movie. And it's exactly what I do. In fact, I have it's probably right behind me, but I have my next book. It's on, they're pink index cards. And so I have my next book written out. It's a stack of index cards.
I may have to try that, because one of the things I was really impressed with was how you kept pace with so many plot things and how you brought it all together in the end, because there's so much going on. And you have a lot of different, characters that are being touched on, and you bring it together so beautifully in the end. I was wondering how that was one of my questions, but you already answered it now.
So what I would do then is, again, more than you need to know probably, but so I've told you I graphed out my main character's arc. But then I also looked at each of the supporting characters, and, we have Malcolm, and you have Sherilyn, and you even have the senator. These are all important characters in the book. You have Crawford. I took the main character arcs there because every character has to have some sign of development throughout the course of the book, or else it's in stasis, right? Everybody's got to be moving forward, particularly a character like Malcolm, who is our computer genius, and he exhibits a lot of growth throughout the book. So I would then plot out their character arc, and I would then kind of do the same things with them as far as the scenes that they needed to have. And they got their index cards. And then when it came to looking at the book, and if I get a new idea, I just have another index card, and you flip through the cards, you go, okay, this will fit right in here. And I put the card in there. And then you can kind of flip through the book just as these index cards, and you can get a feeling for how it's all going to play out. So that's kind of how I kept track of all of these different subplots going.
Okay.
And you were right. At the end, I was thinking, don't get me wrong. I wrote myself into a corner a few times. And at the end of the book, I'm going, okay, how in the hell am I going to get this all to end? And I knew I needed to have an ending where all of these open subplots got concluded at one exact moment in time. It couldn't be staggered. It would have lost any impact it had. So I had to come up with a way to get them all one big bang for the money. And that's hopefully what I did.
Yeah, for sure. And what about research? Because, you're a medical doctor, right? I was impressed with how the terminology certainly came out, which made it feel very real, even though a lot of words I didn't necessarily understand what you were talking about with some of the medical terminology, but I could follow along enough with the context of what you were saying that it worked very well. So I knew what you were doing, even if I didn't know exactly what you meant by some of those words. What kind of research did you have to do on the medical side? And then also you have like the political side, you have the character side. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, thanks. I did a ton of research. And like I said, I made sure that I knew exactly which bit of research I was going to be highlighting for each individual scene. So the medical stuff was the easiest stuff for me, just from my background. I still had to do research then. Certain medicines had changed from when I first started writing. I had to make sure I had certain protocols correct, yada, yada, yada. the technology, which is the crux of the book, was entirely researched. Because even though I was adamant that this not be a science fiction book, nothing I wrote about really exists right now. It's still taking several iterations from where we are right now to move towards what I'm writing about in the book, or what I'm envisioning. I don't like to call it science fiction because everything will happen. The way I've described it, I believe all of these steps are going to happen. It's just going to be a matter of time. So in order to create all of that, I really did have to research all aspects. I'm not a computer god. I barely can type. I'm so all the computer stuff had to be researched. All the concept of virtual reality had to be researched. But then on the flip side, most of that stuff's made up anyways, right? The neuroanatomy, all of that is real. The most interesting part for me, and it was kind of interesting because there was a time period of 15 years when I wasn't working on the book. I didn't work on the book for 30 years straight. There was a 15-year period where it really just sat on ice because I was busy with the day job. And when I pulled it back out and I started rereading it, there was a whole section in there that I really don't even know where it came from. It's like I don't quite remember writing it, and I don't really remember that it even had existed until I read it, and it just flowed so seamlessly. I realized that I must have put this there for a reason. But that is the entire robotics laboratory. The whole character of Helen did not exist in the first several versions of the book. The whole team was just Taylor and Malcolm doing all the work. And if you in the book around chapter 10, we have the big grand round scene where Taylor's presenting his research to the whole faculty. And there's one moment where the faculty gets energized and they start pelting him with questions from the stage. And Taylor's relishing this because it means he's got their attention, right? If they're asking questions, then they're interested. And one of the questions that gets thrown at him from the stage is, how does this laser move within the body? Because that's a crux of the book. He goes into virtual reality inside this coronary artery. He's walking through the coronary artery while inside the real patient, microrobotics are mimicking his movements to the side of the obstruction in the artery. And when he's at the right place, a micro laser will fire, clear the artery, all done while he's just been inside virtual reality. That was the concept of what I wanted to do. But then this character in the book yells out, how does it move? I don't know why he said that. Because I don't know.
Who asked that question?
It was just a big MacGuffin for me. It moves. It just moves. Okay. And then, but I wrote it myself, and then I had to think about it. Well, how does this thing move inside the body? So then I had to really envision, the physics and the biomechanics of how a micro laser could move inside of the body. So then in order to do that, I had to create the whole microrobotics or the whole robotics laboratory, the farm, where Helen Yang is the biomechanical engineer who is working with the team to make the robotics. And she then became such an integral part of the story and an integral part of Malcolm's development and just the entire storytelling process of the book. I can't imagine the book not ever having her, but yet she didn't exist in the first several iterations. And, just to kind of highlight a few points, as somebody who's read the book, there's certain scenes where Malcolm is in the laboratory trying to figure out what's going wrong, and he's on the computer. And there's nothing in the world possibly more boring than writing about a guy in the lab by himself on a computer. Typing, how much reaction can you get, right? But when Helen came in, with her robotic falcon following her and sits down, all of a sudden it now moved into dialogue, and it moved into problem solving, and it moved into increasing tension between the two of them, both within their own developing relationships, but also just tension on heightening of the problem. Yeah. So again, I've learned so much about writing in this book about that concept of having a guy alone at his computer tapping away, revealing stuff to the audience, or having that second person now and throwing it all into dialogue and action in the moment.
Okay.
It made a huge difference.
So Malcolm was the expert on everything, I'm guessing, in the original draft?
Yeah. Well, again, the robotics thing was it was kind of just MacGuffined a little bit. Yeah. But it was all just up to Malcolm to figure that stuff out.
He was already pretty stressed out in this version. I can't imagine what happened in the first version.
Malcolm is a bit of a stress puppy.
I love this character.
He was fun to write. He was so much fun to write.
Yeah, I believe it. And, and the cocoa thing, where did that come from? That was brilliant. That the more stressed out he got, the higher his chocolate, the cocoa in his chocolate got. That was brilliant. I loved it. Every time the cocoa got, the percentage got higher, you knew he was more stressed out, and I just loved that.
Well, and that's exactly how it evolved. I wanted a way to visualize his increasing anxiety without saying he's becoming more anxious.
Yeah.
Without him fidgeting more. He's fidgety already. Malcolm, he takes off his glasses, he wipes them on his shirt and cleans them, puts them back. How many times can you do that? Right. And I'm a bit of a chocoholic myself, just so you know. So, I always got my chocolate bars on hand. I'm also a licorice alcoholic. And so it started off, and this is one of those things, I'll be honest with you. I can't say that I initially planned it the way it evolved. I just had him eating chocolate as a quirk. But as the story kept getting more tense, it just all of a sudden just made sense that he was now getting off of the Nestle's Crunch bars, going to dark chocolate and increasing chocolate. And at the very end, you had that one moment when he's in hiding with the Scotsman Starling, and he asked for a sip of the whiskey. And then Malcolm has reached his limit.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was great. I love that Scottish character, too. So was it Salinger, was it?
Starling.
Starling. Okay, Salinger. I must be probably confusing characters. Starling, right. Yeah, liked his character.
So that place really exists, by the way. I grew up in a small town called Danville. And so when our character is integrating his past into the story, it just kind of made sense for me to have him go back to an area I knew so well. And that area out Tassajara Road with the walnut orchards and, the worm-eaten fences and the dilapidated houses. I mean, that's how it was when I was growing up. I didn't necessarily live there, but that's what that area of town was like. It was all just ranches and walnut orchards. And so I wanted to kind of set him back into that milieu to kind of paint the claustrophobic confines of his childhood home, because that was something that he needed to break out of from the beginning. And up on the hill where he goes to that tree called Bear Tree, that tree really exists on the top of the Las Trampas Range. And I've been there a million times. So those were like my visions looking out over Diablo Valley. And San Damiano, which is the Franciscan retreat up in the hills, is a real place. There really are Franciscan monks walking around there. It's up in the hills above town. And Danville now has about 40,000 people, and I bet you 1,000 even know the San Damiano exists. It's just all up by itself up on the hills. But I used to go there all the time as a kid, and it's always been a place for me to go as a refuge just when I needed my own time to sit down and think and be in peace. And there's the retreat is up to the left on this little bit of a hill, and down the hill is this little white cottage. I never ever knew what it was, but it's been there my whole life. And so I just imagined that must be where the groundskeeper, and he must be Scottish. His name must be Starling. Oh, that's how Starling came about.
Oh, I love that. So your piece of peace and became Taylor's piece of peace.
They say write what you know, and it was a place that I could really resonate, because it isn't knowing something and describing something isn't that interesting in reading so much as the emotional resonance that comes with it. And you can describe something in a million ways, and gosh, you read my book. How about gosh? I'm not a great writer. I don't have big words. I'm not Faulkner. I'm simpler than Hemingway. I don't speak in complex sentences. I don't write in complex sentences. I'm not flowery. You're not going to look at me for that amazing turn of phrase. My entire goal was to tell a story. And the value of the story is if there's any emotional resonance in the arc of this particular character. So to describe something from an emotional point of view, to me, is just a lot more powerful than to describe it from a physical point of view.
Yeah.
So that's why I chose those areas, because I had an emotional connection.
Yeah. No, it landed well. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that his father was also there. And I wanted to ask about his father in that arc. I don't want to give away too much of the story for the readers. So it's almost like an inside question, I guess. Read the book if you haven't read the book. To readers, read it, and then. But his father from like all his fears and the trauma. Did you plan that arc from like the beginning of the book where it's very much trauma and abuse? I don't want to give away what happens in the end, but did you plan that? Because that hit me hard, that arc, from the moment it happened to the end. Like I'm a father as well, and I'm like I've never been abused or abused, but like it still hit hard. And I'm just curious if you like planned that arc or if that just came out in the end.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad that it resonated with you. And just to be clear from the beginning, my father did not physically abuse me. I did have to kind of project, but you can always reach inside of you and find your own hurt, we all have stuff, and in writing character, what I tried to do was find that part of me that is Malcolm, part that is Taylor, part that is Ross, and then bring that forward so that I felt like I was writing within that particular character rather than writing about a character saying stuff. The father and the mother arc was definitely planned from the beginning,
Okay.
with the resultant effects on the brother. And I didn't quite know originally how it was all going to be tied together, but I did know that had to have an emotionally resonant conclusion. And I think that there might have been an early draft where like they ended with their final conversation, but didn't go to the next step, if you know what I'm talking about. But again, partly because at that point, Helen wasn't part of the story. So it was just kind of, I don't even remember how that idea was originally going to end before it all came together for me that this is what I needed to do and how I needed to conclude that arc with Taylor being an active participant in something to really bring resolution to his childhood. And it's because of that so many people have asked me if I'm going to be writing a sequel. Oh, we like Taylor, we love Malcolm, we want you to write a sequel. What's next? And it's like, well, I don't really have a sequel for this book because I feel that Taylor's story has been told. From where he started to where he ended, I feel Taylor's journey has been told. And Sherilyn's journey his wife has moved along, concurrent, alternatingly high and low path.
Yeah,
but
I really love their story.
They've reached a place. And I needed them, once they've all reached that place, for me to do anything now, I'm going to have to pull them back off the shelf and just mess with them.
Yeah.
His story's kind of told.
All the doctors in the hospital go crazy, I guess.
I know. Well, it's exactly right. It's like this concept of what I wanted to do has been told. But in doing this, and here's a little Easter egg for you, and you're the first one to know this, so this can be your exclusive.
All right.
The lead character of my next book, which is based on a different medical principle, has been mentioned already in the Deadly Vision novel.
Cool.
And I can even tell you the chapter if you want, but he's in chapter 3. It's a throwaway sentence. It's a one sentence mention, and it's completely thrown away. And you're not even supposed to pay attention to it. But that's the hero of the next book.
Okay.
And I realized then that what I can do, since I've created this San Francisco University Medical Center with its incredibly toxic politics, which by the way is all 100% real. I mean, that was more me recording than it was making up, because I've spent a lot of time in academic medical centers. And the politics are insane. But I do have all these great characters. And I have Malcolm and I have Helen and I have Ross. I have these characters that if I need a computer genius, well, I can pull Malcolm back out. If I need a great biomechanical engineer, I can bring Helen back out. I can even bring Crawford back, at least, partly in certain story arcs. I can reutilize a lot of these characters. So the milieu and the setting and the support can continue on through different books without it being a series, without there being a true sequel.
Okay. I'm very excited for the next book myself. If you need an early reader or something, let me know. I'm all over that.
I love it. Love it.
Let me know. For sure, reach out.
I mean, the next one's even crazier, by the way. I mean, if you thought there was some psychosis in this one, just wait till the next one.
Okay. So we're running way over time, but I mean, I could ask a million questions. No, that's okay. I could keep going. We're just going to wrap up and then we can get on to some of our bonus questions for our newsletter subscribers.
Okay.
A couple more questions before we do that. For authors who are listening, what advice would you give someone who had just published like their first or second book?
The only advice I can give in that situation is to be absolutely relentless with trying to market it. That's the hardest thing. I mean, writing the book is the biggest challenge in my life. Writing the book was so much harder than going to medical school. Trust me. But getting the book out it's a moment of time, and that moment's then gone. And to get anybody's attention in this world today, with all of the multitudes of options and entertainment, it's nearly impossible. So you really have to be relentless. You have to work your social media platforms. You've done a great job with, your Instagram platform is wonderful, and your Facebook platform is wonderful. So, we have to keep working these platforms. It's just one way to get out there. And you have to be engaging, and you have to be interactive with your audience and with other writers, and do what you can to become part of the community. And the community itself can help to breathe life into your book and get that awareness out there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've been telling everyone about this book when they ask me what I'm up to now. So you're getting plenty of call outs from me because I just loved it. And where can people find your book and find more about you?
It's on Amazon, and it's on Barnes & Noble and, the normal sort of places. I don't know physically if it's in Barnes & Noble, but certainly online it's available there. I have my own website, tdseverin.com. I'm on Facebook, TD Severin Author, Instagram, TikTok, all the normal avenues. The writing name is my initials, TD Severin. My first name is Todd, so Todd Severin has his own profile there as well.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. We'll talk some more with the bonus questions for our subscribers, but I really appreciate you coming on. And if you're listening to this, get Deadly Vision, read it. You're going to love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.